Hey everybody, it's me again, and in this video I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm doing a time-lapse of a concept art painting I've made for my indie game, Anthill Village. I call this painting A Day at the Turnip Quarry, and it's inspired by the idea of, because the ants in my game are sort of human-like, when they go and harvest vegetables for food, they might do it in a sort of a more orderly way, where they cut it into blocks and carry the blocks in a convoy back to the anthill. It's kind of inspired by the building of the pyramids a little bit, or at least how people imagine they were built, because nobody really knows how the Great Pyramids were built exactly. But that's a topic for a whole different kind of video. Instead, I thought I might just, while we have this time-lapse footage playing in the background, maybe I'll answer some common questions that people ask me about the game, Anthill Village. Where is it headed? When's it going to release? What's it going to contain? Also about being a game dev, what's it like being an indie game dev, and a bunch of other topics as well. Starting with digital painting. People have asked me how I make these paintings, and very simply it's done using Photoshop, which, you know, for all the problems with Adobe as a company, I feel like Photoshop probably is still the best painting software. Maybe it won't be forever, but for now it's certainly what I use. And for devices, I use a Wacom Cintiq tablet. That's one of the tablets that have a screen built into them. When I was much younger, I used to own a tablet that didn't have a built-in screen. One of those ones where you sort of have to look at the screen and then have your hand down below where you can't see it, and it breaks hand-eye coordination. Those kinds of tablets I think are just very hard to use. The ones with screens in them are obviously more expensive, but if you're serious about doing digital artworks, I think it is essential to have a screen in the tablet. Because using a tablet is already quite different to drawing on paper. It feels different. You know, there's like this pane of glass in between your pen and the screen, and pens don't slide over the glass the same way that a pencil or a pen slides over paper. You know, there's a certain amount that you have to sort of get used to using a tablet, and if you don't have a screen, then you're also breaking your hand-eye coordination, and the whole experience is just very challenging. So I wouldn't recommend that. I think that the ones with screens in them are the best. I'm still, I think, finding my feet as a digital artist. I made all the art for my previous game, Patch Quest, and for the new game, Anthill Village, but that art was all sort of vector, flat graphics, very stylized, cartoony kind of thing, which tests my drawing skills. I think my drawing skills are pretty good, but making a painting like this is testing my painting skills, and painting really does feel very different to drawing in a lot of ways. When you're drawing, you're sort of defining these hard outlines of shape that divide up the canvas. Whereas when you're painting, you're more sort of smudging in these soft blocks of shape, which sort of build form up rather than dividing form down, something like that. So this kind of painting is something that I'm still a student in. I'm certainly not the best at it, but I'm still pretty happy with how this painting has turned out. I think it's one of my better concept arts so far. Okay, enough about painting. Let's talk about Anthill Village. Number one question is this a real game, or is it just a YouTube project? And yes, it is a real game. I'm going to finish it, and it's going to launch on Steam. Potentially someday there could also be a mobile version. You know, it is mouse control, and that sort of translates to mobile better than consoles. It's all up in the air, but one thing is for sure, it is coming to Steam when it's done. And as for when it's going to be done, it's a difficult thing to answer. I am a solo developer. I'm making the whole thing myself, and game development takes time. Therefore, it's simply not going to launch this year, that is 2025. The earliest it will launch is next year, 2026. And I am aiming for that. I do want to achieve that. I have a plan to get there, but it is also hard to predict so far out into the future how much time things are going to take. I am doing my best to keep it on track, and the key there is getting the scope right, because it's very easy as a game developer to overinflate your plans and to think, ooh, it would be cool if I had this feature and that feature. Gosh, wouldn't this all be awesome? But very quickly you can end up being overwhelmed and end up not actually getting anywhere, not finishing anything because you've taken on too much. And the ironic thing is that game development is tricky. There's a lot of different skills that you have to learn. Coding, artwork, all this and all that, marketing. There's probably a dozen different skill sets you have to learn, but the hardest skill set of them all I've found is prioritization. What should be in the game and what maybe would be nice to have in the game but should not be there because you just don't have the resources for it. And my last game, Patch Quest, was a very big, sort of bustling, fully featured game with loads of content, but because of that, it took me many years to complete that game. In fact, from complete start to finish, it took nearly 8 years to make Patch Quest, and that just isn't feasible. Looking forwards, treating this as a career, as a business, I can't spend 8 years on every game. I'm going to go bankrupt. And as a result, I'm trying to think a lot more about how to make a game simple but still fun. You know, how to capture something within the simplicity of the game. Because people often think, oh, if a game is simple, it's going to get boring quickly. And that often is the case. But then there are also games that are simple and yet are sort of endlessly engaging. You can think of maybe roguelike games as the best example of that as a genre. They remix their content so that it keeps coming in new combinations and orders to keep the player on their toes, keep things fresh. And I think there's probably a range of ways you can do this, making something that's complex and engaging out of something simple. As for the game's inspirations, I'm kind of trying to position it somewhere between a town building game, a simple one like, let's say, Age of Empires, and the Pikmin series, which is a sort of a ant management game. On the Age of Empires side, you know, I'm thinking about how you start from a central building and then you go out and you collect resources. And with those resources, you place more buildings, you advance your society, and then you hit some victory condition and you move on to the next map. I really want to get this feeling of a sort of a small medieval era village or town that is populated by ants that have their own sort of wacky way of doing things. And then on the Pikmin side, I like the idea of your ants working together in swarms, carrying things back to their home, collecting large objects, working as a team, all of that sort of cool ant-like behavior that makes ants so interesting. I've also been watching the YouTube channel Ants Canada, which is a guy who actually is not based in Canada. He's based in, I think, Thailand or somewhere around there. And he has this huge room within which he keeps an enormous number of different anthills and also a gigantic rainforest vivarium. And he makes sort of documentary videos on his ants and the sort of life cycle of the ants and the ecosystem that he's built in his house. They're very interesting videos with a range of topics that I think I can take inspiration from in making the game's world feel a little bit more alive. So I've been watching them. They're also just fun to watch. So that's kind of the direction I'm heading in. There's still a fair bit up in the air, but I also feel like I'm getting closer and closer to pinning down the game's basic formula around which I can build a range of different levels and challenges. Another kind of question that I get asked a lot is about game development. You know, how did you become an indie developer? What's it like? Can I do it too? Is it a realistic career path? And it's a difficult thing to answer because there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons to being a game developer, especially an indie game developer, and even more so if you're doing things alone. Because on the one hand, you get to be creative, and I think that all creative people want or need an outlet for their creativity in their life. And I think that video games are an amazing way to be creative because they contain so much, and there's so many ways you can take a video game and so many things you can put into a video game. But on the flip side of that, in order to build one, you need to have a much broader skill set than basically any other kind of artist. You know, if you're a painter, then you still have a very challenging set of skills to learn, and you can go a really long way with those set of skills and develop them to an amazing degree. And some painters out there are truly, it's astonishing what they can create. But as a game developer, you kind of have to be a bit of a painter. You don't have to be the best painter ever, but you have to be a bit of a painter, but also a bit of an audio engineer and I would say a bit of a programmer, but probably a lot of a programmer as well, because programming is the most essential skill. And then you've got to be a bit of a marketer, and you've got to have like a feeling for what makes a game fun. And as I talked about earlier, you also need to be able to prioritize, manage a project that goes on for many months, many years. It's very difficult. And for that reason, I would say that if you want to get into game dev, I would absolutely encourage it. I would never turn someone away from doing it, but I would say at the very least start off in a team. Go to a relevant school, get a qualification, find friends who are like-minded, start a team or join a bigger company, and do it with other people until you reach the point where you feel like you have all of the skills you need to start your own project. And if you are dead set on indie game development, then I would definitely encourage you to look to the future, because game development has always been a fast evolving area. In my lifetime, we've gone all the way from like the Nintendo Entertainment System with the original 8-bit Mario, all the way up to, you know, whatever the biggest new AAA 3D graphics, realistic simulation game is. And then also to a broad diversity of games, online games like League of Legends and Fortnite, and VR games as well, that's a whole new thing. And you can even get games on your phone, you can get games inside of web pages. So if you're a young person thinking of getting into game development, I would say try to be open-minded about what a game should be, about what a game can be, about new technology on the horizon. Nvidia is inventing a lot of new technologies that are going to use AI to power future games. Technologies that can, for example, pilot a humanoid within a 3D world without having to precisely program everything they do, and also technologies that make a world more physically simulated, so sort of every character in the world is a ragdoll and you can push and pull on them. Text-to-speech, being able to talk to a game and have the game understand you. There's also probably going to be new devices, new ways of playing, new game design ideas. And I think that if you can sort of play around with these things and look to the future, then you'll be in a good place to create something that catches the moment, rather than playing catch-up to what everyone else is doing. I remember when I first started doing game development full-time, the big thing was roguelike games, and everybody was doing it, and now there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them on Steam, and it's very difficult to stand out. And since then, the big new thing has become roguelike deck building games like Slay the Spire. Everyone's trying to be the new Slay the Spire. And again, if you love these games and you want to make your own version of them, I wouldn't say, oh, don't do it. But what I would say is, think about what the financial consequence of that might be, the financial consequence of doing the same thing as everybody else. It probably means no one's going to notice or care about what you're doing unless you're very lucky. Instead, I think the indie game developers that do the best in the future are going to be the ones who are doing totally new things with new technologies and new ways of thinking. And this maybe segues into the next topic, which is that I'm quite positive about the future of the art industry and the role that AI will play inside of it. I think the future is bright for artistic people. I know that maybe puts me in the minority, or at least there's a vocal group of people who think that AI is a sort of coming apocalypse for the arts and for artistic people that will make it impossible to find a job. But I don't see it that way. I think that AI will actually increase and expand opportunities for artistic people. I talked about this a couple weeks ago in a video I put up that not many people watched, but that's okay. Basically, I was talking about why I think AI will be a good thing, and I got a lot of responses, a lot of pushback from people saying things like, look, there's all these problems with AI, it's taking jobs, it's destroying careers. It's a very serious thing that we all need to be worried about. And, I mean, that is all true, it is all true. But my view is that over the longer term, it's going to be a positive thing. And I know that might sound crazy, I know people might think I'm just completely mad. How could a terrible thing turn into a great thing? Here's the thing. Whenever a new technology comes along, people try using that technology to do the things they've already been doing, just more efficiently. Like, when computers came along, people first thought, hey look, now we can do all of our paperwork we used to do, but we can do it digitally so it will be more efficient. And it took people time to realize, hey, there's actually brand new things this opens up, like the internet or, video games for that matter. People started to realize there's new things you can do with all of this beyond just efficiency and cost cutting. And I think this happens with all new technologies, and what we're seeing now is big studios saying, okay, there's this new technology, maybe instead of having all these concept artists, we can have just one digitally enhanced concept artist, and then we can cut a few of those jobs. And if you're one of these people being cut, then that's really going to suck, and it is going to be a threat to you. But I think if we project all this over the longer term, I think what we're going to see is that people don't really need these big studios anymore, because the whole reason why we have big studios, like, the big game developers, EA and Activision Blizzard and all these people, as well as big movie studios like the Hollywood studios, the reason why we have these places is because making video games and making movies is really expensive. It costs many, many millions of pounds to make a big, flashy video game or a blockbuster movie. And because of that, you need people to band together. You need funding, you need organization, planning, you need, management, you need all this stuff that acquires the resources and manages the resources and convinces the investors that the resources are not going to be wasted. And you have to wrangle that into a finished artistic product, which is very difficult. There's a real risk of big companies sort of squeezing the artistic vision out of everything that they create because they're so focused on business and bureaucracy. So it's always been an uneasy tension. And I think that AI opens up the ability for smaller teams to do bigger budget projects without spending that budget, without needing that budget. You have big publishers that pump out Call of Duty year after year after year, FIFA year after year. Well, what if you could make a game on that scale with just 10 people? Suddenly, what we'd see is the power drain away from the big studios and go towards smaller teams. In other words, I think we'd see a decentralization, a democratization of the creative industries because of AI, and it'll matter way less whether you can get the money to hire lots of people, and way more whether you have an artistic vision that resonates with people, whether you're making something that people want, that people are excited about. I've seen, for example, various world building projects on YouTube where you have just one guy dreaming up a whole world and using, writing and still images to sort of evoke this world they're trying to create. One example of this is the Eternal Ruins channel on YouTube. I rather like that one. But imagine if these people could also create a fully realized digital version of the world, basically a video game version of the worlds that they're trying to pull together. It would be amazing. Right now, that would cost millions, but in the future, Who knows, maybe a few people could do that. And I think that this decentralization will result in more people doing this, more people making games successfully, and more creativity in the things that are created. In the same way as how, YouTube videos today, there's so many more of them and they're so much more diverse than what you used to find on television. The power has drained away from big television networks and gone towards individual creators. And as a result, I think we're all much richer for it. So I wouldn't be afraid of AI. In fact, I would encourage people to, try to figure out ways, especially if you want to be a game dev, try and figure out ways it can empower you to create your visions. And I'm not personally using any AI in Anthill Village. I think the technology isn't advanced enough yet to actually be of much real use. I do have a sort of a AI-empowered code autocomplete in my code editor. It comes built in with Unity these days, which is nice. It helps me write code quicker, but that's about the extent of my AI usage in my current project. I'm talking more for young people who are thinking about, getting a career in this, going to university and learning how to get these skills. I would definitely encourage looking forwards. And I do think that the next generation of people will see AI as much more of an opportunity than people who are already established who might see it more as a threat. In fact, there's a quote from Douglas Adams. He's a British writer who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This quote is, "Anything that's in this world when you're born is normal and ordinary, and is just a natural part of the way the world works. Whereas anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. But anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things." And it is a comedic quote, it's not meant to be taken completely literally, but I think it gets to this idea of younger people will naturally see opportunities where older people might see danger, and younger people obviously end up building the next sort of iteration of the world. Okay, let's now talk about something a little bit lighter to close out this video. Some people ask me what games I've been playing recently. And ironically, I've not been playing any ant-related games. In fact, I've kind of been deliberately ignoring and avoiding them because, mainly because I don't want to be overly influenced by other people's ideas at this early stage in my game's development. I want to try and come up with my own fresh ideas before I see what other people have done. That said, maybe it is time for me to play some more ant games and see if I can incorporate any of their best ideas into what I'm doing. We'll see how that goes in the future. Instead, what I've been playing is some games that are sort of only tangentially related or not related at all, for sort of more indirect inspiration. Sometimes I think inspiration can be found in weird places where you're not expecting it. So I've been playing a bunch of indie games like Balatro, that's my new favourite roguelike game. I've also played Outer Wilds for the first time. That game's really cool. I've got a game design analysis breakdown on both of those games coming out soon to this channel. I was playing more Apex Legends. I was getting back into Apex Legends, and then bam, like clockwork, they put in an update that just ruins the game. It's like a Final Fantasy takeover. Now you have the Buster Sword and it's totally imbalanced, and there's these little Loch Ness monsters that come out of loot boxes and hunt people down. It's so silly. This is not why I play Apex Legends. I want it to be a sort of just a balanced sort of fair fight between my friends and enemy teams, and the game just seems to not want to give this to me. Anyway, that's enough complaining about Apex Legends. Complaining about it is something I could probably do for hours. Let's move on. I'm very excited for Civilization 7 launching in a couple of weeks. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with Civ 6. There's some things I really like about it, other things I feel like it just doesn't get right. But Civ 7 looks like they've put a lot of thought into it, and they hopefully have addressed a lot of my problems that I've had with the Civ franchise up till now. So I'm really hoping that game will be loads of fun, and I'm excited to play that one. And as for what is next for me and the channel, I've been building a pathfinding system for Anthill Village, and this pathfinder will allow me to have more complex levels that are more maze-like, have obstacles that the ants have to run around or the enemies have to run around. And I think I've built a pathfinder that's pretty much the fastest pathfinder in existence, or maybe that's exaggeration. It's the fastest pathfinder that I've seen anybody demonstrate on YouTube. And I'm going to be giving away the source code for people to try out and expand upon. I didn't invent the algorithm that this pathfinder is based on, I've just implemented it based on a research paper that's a number of years old now. And it's really cool. So come back soon if you want to see that. And I've also been putting out weekly videos recently. No one's been watching them, sadly. I think that might be because I've not put ants in the thumbnail so people don't know it's me. Or to be honest, maybe people just aren't interested in these videos. That's fair enough. But if you have enjoyed this video, consider keeping an eye out for next week and the week after and so on. Because I'm trying to keep this weekly video schedule up in the hopes that people will be interested in it eventually. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.